Hello, welcome to Art History with Becca. I'm Becca, and today we are going to talk about ancient Egyptian art. And this art is from a 2,000-year time period, about 4,000 years ago. So it's old again, but not as old as what we talked about yesterday. So just as we're getting started, I want to make sure you have some paper. I've got a whole notebook of paper right here, and some pencils would be good. I've just got some regular pencils. I have some colored pencils. I even brought a crayon. Markers are good too. I've got a few different kinds. I have some artist markers that I brought and I like to use, but I also just, Crayola crayons, those are good too. Or a finer tipped crayon. You could even do this with a pen, I guess, if you have a pen. So that's what we're gonna need. Okay, let's see who's here today. Ooh, Sasha, hi. Welcome, nice to see you today. Lorna, is it hieroglyphs? Yes, we're gonna talk about hieroglyphs today. Hello, Isis, Amelia, hi. Hi, okay. Okie dokie. Holly, hi, I love art. I love art too. I really like history and I like art. So this is kind of a really fun class for me to deliver. Isaiah, hi. Okay, good. So yes, we're going to talk about art. And I guess we can get right on into it. And if you have any questions, use the Q&A box. And I can answer questions there if I'm going too fast, or if you want me to go over something again, you can answer there. And then yesterday, some of you sent in your art to our email, and it was events, events, @delphian.org. So if you want to send me some art after this class, that would be really cool because I can't see you. And I really would love to see your art. So that's that. And we are gonna get started now. And I've got my paper, I've got my markers, and we're gonna get started on the lesson for today. Let's see, I'm gonna pull up some pictures first of some art that we're gonna talk about. So first of all, when we are talking about Egyptian art, we are talking about Egypt, which is in Northern Africa. It's the one that's in red right there on that map. And if you get in closer and you look at Egypt, which is the picture on my right, I think it's on your right too, there's a river there. It's a pretty important river. It's called the Nile River. And it's a really big river. At some places, it's like a mile or more across. So it's really big, and every year it would flood. And if you kind of look at the green area that's around that Nile, that was really good land for farming. That's where people liked to live. And so the Egyptians were kind of like a farming community, and they settled here and they lived here for about 2,000 years. And while they were living here, they spent a lot of their time farming and building some very interesting monuments and buildings for their kings. And their kings were called pharaohs. So we're going to go there. So they had kings that were pharaohs, and they were the almighty. They ruled the land. And the people believed that they were gods themselves, pretty much. And they worshipped them, and they had all this really beautiful jewelry that they made. Here in this picture, you can see a couple of their necklaces, and they're all made with gold and different precious gems. And you can see there's a bracelet, and those bracelets inside, they have words, and those are the first hieroglyphs that you're going to see here in this class. And we know that these are hieroglyphs from a king or a queen, a pharaoh. And I'll tell you why we know that in just a little bit. But you're going to want to look and see if you can see the circles where some of the hieroglyph pictures are inside the circle inside there. So that's going to be important. So I want you to remember that, okay? And you can see that the pharaohs are the ones that are most decorated outfits. So they kind of have the sparkliest things on and the funniest looking hats. And so the Egyptians had kings that they worshiped like gods, and they believed that whenever a pharaoh died, that they went into another life where it was an eternal life, where they got to basically be a kind of a king or a god forever. And so it was really important to them to bury the pharaohs in really like epic graves. And so they built these pyramids, and these pyramids are huge. And there's like one little tunnel in there, and it kind of goes to a few rooms, and this is what they were buried under. And they spent their entire lives kind of building these giant buildings to bury the pharaohs, the kings in. And that's kind of, you know, a lot. We don't do this anymore. And let's see. So when they died, they had these big pyramids to go to, that their bodies would put in, but it wasn't just that their bodies. So they did something where they believed that when a pharaoh died, not only did they go into another life where they got to live forever, but they got to bring all their stuff with them. So what they did is they buried the pharaohs with all this treasure. And it was all this stuff made out of gold and precious gems, and they buried it all in the same tomb or pyramid. And you can see that there's a few different rooms here. And this one room, the first room, has all these chariots that they could have attached to horses, and there's tables and there's statues. There's another room back there that's got all this furniture in it. And then you go into the burial chamber, where you see kind of this big epic coffin looking thing that's got kind of multiple different layers that they showed in this illustration. And then there's the treasury. So there's a bunch of golden things in there. And they really believed that this was important, to be buried with all of your, you know, money and expensive stuff. Here's some questions here. They stuck them in jars of salt. Yeah, that's true. They did a lot of things in the embalming process to make the mummies stay. So when the king died, they turned them into a mummy, and there's a whole process involved in that I'm not going to get into too much. I just kind of want to show you what it looked like. So this is the sarcophagus, is what they called their coffins, I guess. And this is for King Tut. And he had basically 4 sarcophaguses that kind of all fit inside of each other. And so there was a smaller one, and then there's a bigger one, and then there was a bigger one, and then there's a big box that it was in. And in this last picture, that burial chamber, you can kind of see this was King Tut's burial chamber. So that's what it looked like on the inside, and that was all his, and that's what his sarcophagus looks like. And it's made out of gold, and there's all these precious metals on it. And they did such a good job preserving and making all of this art, this burial art, that it's lasted for a really long time, and you can still see all the details. It didn't really get damaged by weather or anything like that. So, you know, the pyramids did a good job of protecting it. And inside of these tombs also, besides all the treasure and the body, they would do a lot of writing, and they would write down a lot about the king, about the pharaoh. They would write about them on the walls. and they would write stories about how that person lived, their achievements. They would write down how they thought that they were going to go into the afterlife and the kind of a story of how that was all going to work. And so there's a lot of writing on all the walls. So here's some, and the interesting thing about hieroglyphs, and you can see them here, is they can be read in multiple different ways. So you can read them from top to bottom, which is how these ones are meant to be read. And you can read them from left to right. So if you look at this picture, the bottom ones, you read them from left to right, and the top ones, you read them from top to bottom. And they kind of lay them all out in columns or rows. And you can also read them from right to left, which is maybe a little confusing, but I'll get more into that in a minute. And here is a picture from inside of a tomb of a Pharaoh queen. And we know she is a Pharaoh queen because her name is actually written inside of what's called a cartouche. And remember, I told you that oval shape was important. Well, whenever a king or a queen's name was written down, they would put it inside of that oval shape. And that oval shape is called a cartouche. So it's kind of a big oval with a line on the bottom. And that's her name. So all those pictures is what her name is. And the other hieroglyphs around her, those are telling some kind of story about something that's going on. Oh, I've got some questions. I'm going to answer some questions for a little bit. Were there thieves that stole stuff from them? Absolutely. So it was pretty common when they were discovering a lot of these tombs that they got raided and thieves stole stuff. A lot of the stuff got preserved though and got taken to museums. There's a lot of Egyptian art in the British Museum. The British people were big adventurers, explorers that discovered a lot of Egyptian art. Let's see, there's a lot more. There's a lot more questions here too. Let me see if I can get to some of them. Where did the Egyptians get all that gold? You know, that's a good question. They probably got it from similar places that we get it. It's mined in the mountains. They collected it and made it into pretty things. And how did they know who the next pharaoh would be? Well, it's similar to kind of how kings and queens work today. And when a pharaoh died, their child was the one who took over. Whether their child was a daughter or a son, that would be the next pharaoh. Let's see. What? Was King Tut poisoned? That's a good question. I don't totally have an answer for that. He died when he was pretty young. He was around 1920. So there are rumors that that might have been what happened. But some biologists were able to use science on his body, and they kind of discovered that he died of natural causes. So that's the current theory. Why did the Egyptians draw so funny? Well, that's a good question. They liked to draw the side of your face, and they liked to draw the full body, and they liked to draw the feet in like a walking position. So it's not really how we actually see people. And they did that as just kind of the style of how they showed the body. And someone said, basically you can read them any way except for down to up. That's right. Hieroglyphs can be read from right to left, left to right, or top to bottom. I haven't seen any that you read from bottom to top. Let's see. Someone said Nefertiti. She was an Egyptian pharaoh. She was a queen. And we're not going to talk too much about her today either, though. Let's see. Okay, so let's get back to the pictures. There's a lot of questions. I'm not going to be able to answer all of them, but if you have questions that I don't get to today, you can always send them to events@delphian.org, and I will answer you back after the class, okay? Let's see. So let's keep going. So here's another couple pictures inside of some tombs, and you can see all the hieroglyphs all over decorating. There's big pictures, there's little pictures. I think there's even some on the ceilings. In the one that's got all the color, that's actually a lot of painting. It's also some precious stones that were inlaid into the walls. And here you can just kind of get a sense of how big some of these structures are. So these are pretty big statues, and they didn't have forklifts or cranes or scaffolding quite the same that we do. They didn't really have any of those machines. So they built these all by hand, and they carved them by hand. It's a lot of work, and it's pretty amazing. And they all got here by building them. So they used a process to make brick with the sand, and they built and carved all of this. Yeah, they used clay, they used their hands, and they used tools. So tools that they made. All right, so next, okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the Egyptian hieroglyphs. So there are lots of picture writing. So I want to go back to this one because you can kind of see the pictures a little bit more. There's little pictures that look kind of like birds. There's little pictures that look kind of like eyes, maybe a mouth, little shapes. There's one that looks kind of like a little foot or a little arm. And you might be wondering, how do we read that? And for a long time, we all wanted to answer that question, and we didn't know. And what finally was discovered was a big stone called the Rosetta Stone. And so this is a picture of the Rosetta Stone. It's in the British Museum. And what is on this stone is very important, so that it's written in 2 different languages, and it says the same thing in each language. But it's not important what it says. It's important that the 2 different languages. So the top half is all written in Egyptian hieroglyphs, and the bottom half is all written in Greek. And the reason that this is important is because the Greek language came forward in history, and we didn't lose how to read it. And the Egyptian language, we did lose how to read it, so we didn't know how to read it. So this was the first time that we had found something that had both languages and a direct translation of each one. So someone pointing out that the stone is broken, that's true. And again, it's not so important what the stone even says here. What is important is that it tells us word for word a translation. So we're able to translate what the Egyptian hieroglyphs say. And so that's pretty important, because without that, we wouldn't be able to do our activity today. So just looking at something like this is kind of what, if you were writing a letter in school, and instead of learning the alphabet, you learned hieroglyphs. This is what a paper might look like. And you can't really figure out how to write something like that without knowing how to read or how to use the alphabet. And in this picture, this is another picture. This is from King Tut's tomb again. And so this is King Tut. He's actually on here 3 different times. So he's in kind of this 3 different pictures. So he is on the left, he is a small child. And then in the middle, he's the one with the kind of shorter, boyish looking hair. And then on the right-hand side, he is getting ready to move into the afterlife. He's kind of the mummy looking guy. Someone said we lost Latin. Well, we didn't really lose Latin. We don't speak in Latin anymore, but there are still people who understand it. How come they depict humans with animal heads as birds? Well, they believed, like I said, they believed in gods. They believed in multiple different kinds of gods. And their gods often came as birds. And so Isis was was kind of their main god. And that was depicted as a crow or a black bird. So that head is often on a picture. And here on the bottom of this, you can see King Tut's name. So, and they wrote it two different ways. So here it is kind of vertical. So that's his name. And then here it is written a little bit differently. And that's also his name in those two circles. And then if you look on the wall, you can see which person is King Tut based off of where his name is written close to his face. So that's how we know that that was a pharaoh, is because his name is written there in a cartouche. So that's that. So now we're going to get into an activity where we are going to make our own names, okay? So we are going, here is a translation of the hieroglyphs to letters. And so first things first, though, you kind of gotta, these letters don't necessarily directly translate to a word. We're going to do it that way today, but just so you know, in real hieroglyphic language, they would translate it to like a sound. So if there's a silent letter in your name, you don't use that hieroglyph for that letter. You just use the hieroglyphs for the letters that you can hear whenever you say your name out loud. So let's get our piece of paper and let's get a marker and go ahead and just write your name in with just regular letters. Okay, so then my name is Becka, but you don't really hear the C in my name. You kind of just hear the K sound. So I'm just going to cross out the C. I'm just going to put an X on that. I'm not going to do a hieroglyph for that letter. And I am going to now, I'm going to go back to the picture that's of me in just a minute. I know you can't see me, but I want you to be able to see the alphabet here. So go ahead and write down your name, and then I want you to cross out any letters that you can't hear when you say your name out loud. So for my name, I wrote Becka, B-E-C-K-A, but you don't really hear the C, so I went ahead and just put a big X through it. And so now my name is spelled B-E-K-A. And from there, I am going to find some of the hieroglyphs here, and I am going to use them to draw my name. So let's see, the leg. The leg is something to do with my name. That is a B. My leg even has a little toe that sticks up. So that's exciting. And then there's a feather. And there's a cup. Whoops, I messed up, guys. I told you to cross out that. I meant to cross out the C, and I went and wrote the C anyway. So I'm going to ignore that. But the good news is that the cup for C and for K is kind of the same shape. So that's great. And then a vulture. And my vulture is going to look a little different than that vulture. But I'm going to make sure his beak is pointing the right way. All right. So now I'm going to share with you what the hieroglyphs are for my name, okay? So I'm going to show you back the picture my face has. So these are the hieroglyphs that are my name. So this is a foot, and this is a feather, this is a cup, and this is a vulture. And the funny thing about hieroglyphs, whenever they're all for one word, you can kind of stack them and mix them around in a way that looks pretty, because it's important when you're writing in hieroglyphs that the words are also pretty. And so I'm going to take these hieroglyphs now that I know which ones are mine, and I'm going to figure out how to put them kind of in a pattern that I think is going to look good. So I think, and we can try lots of different combinations until we find one that we like. So I'm going to do the cup at the bottom, and then I'm going to do the vulture standing on top of the cup. I'm going to draw it like that. He's got two legs. I'm going to draw the foot right here. And I'm going to draw the feather right here. I kind of like that shape a little bit better than writing it this way. And then I've decided I would like to be a queen today. So I'm going to put it inside a cartouche like that. And cartouches kind of have this line underneath, kind of like that. So there's my name. That is what Queen Becka looks like. Okay. Now I'm also going to write, I've got a piece of paper here. I'm going to use this to draw a line. I'm going to draw my name also. I'm going to draw it this way. Also, I'm going to draw it this way. Because as long as we can write it in lots of different directions, let's do it, yeah? All right. Okay, let me put the picture back on of the alphabet, okay? And I want you guys to now do this with me, and I want you to practice writing your name. And if you want to, you can go ahead and draw it inside of our cartouche and make yourself a king or a queen. Okay, so I'm going to draw my name again. And I am going to draw it in a sideways cartouche. I'm drawing it a little differently than I did that first time. Changing a way I'm arranging my hieroglyphs so that it can fit in a more sideways shape. But I am a queen, so I get to do that in this class. All right, so there's that. Now I'm going to draw it in the vertical. So now I'm going to keep trying out different combinations. I haven't found the one that I think is the prettiest version of how to draw my name. So I'm going to kind of play around with that with this vertical one real quick. And then I'm going to move on. I'm going to try and write secret message using hieroglyphs. Okay. So now I've drawn my name again. I put in my cartouche again. Let's see. What is the hieroglyph for the letter A? That's a vulture. And a vulture is a bird that likes to eat dead animals that it finds. But the vultures were kind of important to the Egyptians because they were a representation of the afterlife. Ooh, Isaiah says that his name is a vulture, a water snake, vulture, lion, and a feather. Nice. Good to do. It's your birthday. Happy birthday, Akasha. Thank you for spending your birthday drawing with me. That's awesome. Let's see. Someone says I didn't use vowels when writing. Well, they only used words that they only used sounds they could hear. So if you can hear the vowel in your name, they would have used it. But if you can't hear it, they wouldn't use it. And also, it's not a perfect translation. So just like when you translate something from English to Spanish or French or any other languages you might know or might be learning or might be familiar with, how you say it in one language, it's not going to be the exact same in another language. Let's see. What about numbers? That's a good question. Well, there's a lot more hieroglyphs out there. This is not all of them. And this is not a complete alphabet of them, but I wanted to pick something kind of simple that we could do today. Why do they wear the eyeliner? The eyeliner was a nod to the gods, and it was just kind of a way of showing that they were gods. Lion, feather, bolt, vulture. Ooh, those are some cool symbols that are for your name. All right, so we've got a few minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just kind of use this alphabet, and I am going to write a message. So I already wrote my name. So I'm going to write a secret left message, and I'm going to say hi. So I'm going to use that wick. For my H. Hi, H, I, feather. So that's hi, and then I'm going to write my name. So let's see. Ooh, an owl. Cute looking owl. Not as fierce as the one in the picture, but oh well. It'll work for today. And then it's a double feather. And if you want to, you can write these with pencil and then write over them with marker. But we're just being pretty casual today, so I'm just writing it all in marker. So N, A, M, and then I need an E, which is another feather. My name. And then is so my name is, just going to take it back. I'm going to go back to my face really quick. Sorry if you're using the alphabet for a second. And, oh, somebody asked a good question really quick though. All right, what is a ka is what it is. So it's that last symbol, and it kind of looks like a cross from a church or something like that. And that is the symbol that means life, or like the afterlife. And you see it a lot in tombs because that is the symbol that's talking about life everlasting. So that's what that means. It's a pretty important symbol to them, just like the cross is important to churches today. All right, I'm going to show you my secret message, and then I'll go back to this alphabet. So here it says my name is Becka, but it's a Queen Becka because it's inside of a goosh. So that's that. So let's go back to this alphabet, and I'm going to leave it on this alphabet for a little bit. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and I'll try and get them answered as we're finishing up. Did they have school? Someone asks. Yes, they had school, but unfortunately in that time period, the schools were for the very rich, and the poor people didn't really go to school. They just had jobs and they worked. I also drew lightning as arrows. Okay. You know, it's kind of fun to look at hieroglyphs as kind of like this coded message. And I used to always make up my own codes when I was a kid, and it's kind of fun. I used to have a code with my sister, and we would write each other letters. Let's see. Somebody asked, was their eyeliner called coal? Yes, it was. And it was actually pretty toxic. It's not like makeup eyeliner is today. It was not very good for your eyes. And if you wore it for an extended period of time, you probably would go blind or something. Lion, feather, bolt, vulture. Nice. Those are some good symbols. Can rich people get a coffin? I think what you're asking is if you were maybe not the Pharaoh, but if you were just a wealthy person, would you get a burial like a Pharaoh would for the afterlife? And I don't have an answer to that. Perhaps, I mean, if you had enough money, I'm sure you could. But we haven't found them around. We don't know that that's a thing that they did. We know that the kings were buried this way, and the kings were treated as gods. So I believe that they probably didn't worship them in the same way. Let's see. More good questions in here. Someone says here that when King Tut died, maybe he died from coal that he used for eyeliner. That's an interesting theory. I wonder if they've tested for that, maybe. Loaf, wick, vulture, water cup, which means thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Wow, I can tell that some of you have been studying some Egyptian history. You know some good facts here. This is awesome. All right. What are some other things that you guys are writing down? What are you figuring out how to write? I think I'm going to write one more message. A couple minutes that we have. So let's see, I'm using a loaf, a vulture, and a lot of their hieroglyphs, they used paint to paint them. And they got really good at them. They almost looked like they used stencils, but they painted most of them. I kind of wonder too, if depending on the artist, the shapes of the animals probably changed just a little bit. All right. So draw the lines. You can tell that you're supposed to read this from left to right because my animals face towards the beginning. And that's how you read hieroglyphs. So here is one I just drew. And this says, thank you. I want to thank you for coming and joining me in this class. I just found out I'm going to be teaching another one next week, so I hope you can all come back to that and learn more art with me, more history, and we'll do some more drawing, and send me your pictures of any of the artwork that you drew. I would love to see it. You can send it to events@delphian.org. That's an email, or you can send it to one of our social media accounts and I can get it that way too. So thank you for joining in. This was fun.